Well, good morning, everyone from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. It's not morning elsewhere. We're really thrilled to have our well-read reading group. Here we go in the head and heart art of modern leadership. Today, it's our focus. And I am thrilled to be joined by my colleagues and friends, Rania Sawali and Andrea Stringer, who will share a little bit about where they are. And I know it's not morning for you, which is what we love. And we'd love to see a little bit about who is joining us. If you're catching us on the recording, we're so glad you're here. And we're thrilled to have Maria popping on. So the gang is together again, which is always fun. We're really looking forward to digging into this new book. Oh, let's put Kirsten back. I love it. Playing roulette here with the slides. So maybe Rania, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Thank you, Trista. Hi, welcome everyone. Good time and good morning. This is Rania Sawalhi, PhD Education Leadership. I'm originally from Jordan, live and work in Qatar Children's Museum. And I enjoy joining those reading discussions. This is our 10th. So we're so lucky to have, all these kind of memories and different perspectives from different continents. Andrea?
Hi, I'm Andrea. I am in Sydney and it's Friday evening here, and it's gotten a little bit cold here at the moment, but when I say cold, I know nothing like you, Trista. But yeah, really excited to be talking with you, the three of us, four of us all together about Head and Heart. I think it's been something that we can have a really good conversation about with our experiences as well in leadership. So Maria, are you able to join us? There we go.
Hi everyone, good morning from England. I managed to join you finally. Good to be here with you. And I'm based in London at the moment. I'm an academic at the University of Southampton. Yeah, the employability lead at the School of Education. Always great to be among you and discuss about our experience and reflect on the books that we have read. I'm afraid that because this book will be released in the UK in September, in both the Kindle edition and the paperback, I haven't really read the book, but I will contribute to the discussion based on my experience and any related academic knowledge that I do have. So yeah, I look forward.
And then I'm so excited for you to read it after this conversation as well, Maria, and add your comments. And I'm Trista, I'm in Ottawa, and really thrilled to be part of this conversation. Number 10, holy cow, our little pandemic project has just grown. And before we jumped onto this call, we were just chatting about how great it is to give you the almost like the accountability to make sure you get through these books and to think about it in a different way. And it's been really valuable for me. So I'm so grateful to well read for this opportunity. So today's focus, we're looking at Kirsten Ferguson's book. And if you have seen any of our work before, you will know that we've read another book by Kirsten Ferguson. So we had enjoyed Womankind and even had a chance to talk to Kirsten about that book. So we were thrilled to see her new book. There it is, Womankind. Maria, thank you for holding up. And our current book, here it is right now. We're going to have to get our famous shot, Andrea. So do you want to do that now? We'll do a quick, or at the end here. We do it right now?
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Wait one sec. Done.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. And so
can I just say one thing about Kirsten? Because I met Kirsten quite a few years ago. I used to be organize a part for our school. We had aspiring leaders and women who are in leadership. They all came together. And I asked Kirsten, would she like to come and speak with everybody? And when she talks about her leadership and that humility, curiosity, she walks the talk. That's one thing I can say about Kirsten, is she's always open to sharing her knowledge. I've contacted her for other advice, and I feel like she is the one person, like, you get to know her through her book, I think, her books. But yeah, just wanted to share that with you all.
That's really great. It's so powerful.
It's
Go
really
ahead, Rania.
interesting, you know, like the first book when she started via Twitter and had those all the voices to be documented and to be shared. And I loved also this book when she provided the Head and Heart scale to be online for free. So that around 10,000, I think, had already participated within that scale. So this is something also we'll be mentioning. But how to combine those different perspectives and different tools and different platforms, that's really kind of enlightening. In addition to her humbleness, you know, the way that she was joining and sharing and allowing, you know, like for feedback and discussion, which we also were going to discuss within our book. So our book is talking about rethinking leadership. This is the table of contents. If anyone who read the book or who is willing to read the book after our discussion. Rethinking leadership. The second part, she's talking about leading with our heads and those 4 components, which we will be referring, and that's part of the scale: curiosity, wisdom, perspective, capability. And then leading with our hearts, that's also the 4 of them. And then how to integrate our heads with modern leaders from modern times. Are we ready to go deeper?
I think we should just dig in. Let's do it. Let's
Yeah.
dig in.
I like this quote. I think this is something we might start our discussion with, that every leader would leave a legacy. And when you mentioned, Andrea, you know, like walking the talk, sometimes we don't think about our behaviors or our actions, but that would leave an impact on people around us in a way.
Yeah. And I think too, a lot of leaders now have working towards a legacy of building other leaders. So a lot of people say they move on or whatever. And I've spoken to some principals and say, when I've had a colleague who goes up and becomes a principal of another school, that to me means I've been successful, because they've built the capacity of that leader and taken the time so that they can become a principal of another school. They don't feel like they're losing personally, but other people are gaining. So I think that's a really positive outlook for a leader to have as well. That's their legacy.
I agree. And I think there's a tension right now still about being celebrated as an individual leader. Because I think it's a shift. If you're really thinking about the legacy of if you're really thinking about succession and growing a culture where leadership happens all over, that is a tension between the celebratory single leader, which we still see in certain contexts, you know, the person that still wants to be recognized, right, as the top leader, and then that tension that exists because you provide leadership opportunities for others. So it's not, I think that it's an interesting time, but if we don't start paying attention to succession in systems and schools, I'm thinking in academia, you know, you're working with your research assistants, like they're all future leaders in universities. And so those moments are really important, rather than having them sort of work towards building you up. So I do, it's an interesting time. I'm not sure everyone is on board, but this is kind of a tension. I think it's good and valuable, and I hope is a shift that we start thinking legacy. Maria, I can see you nodding away. You're muted though. You're muted.
For some reason, the video goes on and off, so I'm not playing with the video. Anyway, yeah, I totally agree with you, because good leaders really impact others through, you know, their own actions, the behavior, and the walk the talk, as I think Rania said that. Also, in terms of succession planning, it's really important that good leaders leave a legacy, because we really need good leaders, especially Trista mentioned academia. It's very, we live very uncertain moments, and there is so much uncertainty, and in some cases, there is a lack of capacity in education context that we have all been working in anyway. Things don't change. But what is interesting about it is that although there are so many books about leadership and leadership skills, thrown around a lot of environments, corporate environments, business, education environments, and so on and so forth, I think there are so many lessons that we can learn from the different perspectives that authors are approaching the books, that it can only be beneficial. That's what I wanted to add.
Before we go to defining what is modern leader, like sometimes we're not aware that teachers will be promoted to be head teachers or middle leaders position, or even within the university settings, and we tend to copy what we have seen others doing when they were leaders. And we don't have our own touch, or we do not reflect or see how we're building our own capacity and what kind of things that we need to do to develop our own skills. I'm not generalizing, but sometimes this is happening because we find ourselves in some positions or some tasks or some roles at different levels. So what kind of actions are we taking? What kind of decisions, what kind of behaviors, and why are we doing this? I think this book would give us kind of a glimpse or an overview for us, or as Kristen had mentioned, that those components or elements are not a set or fixed. They are just encouraging us to rethink about them. So what did you think about the art of modern leadership? Who are the modern leaders in your perspective? This is her kind of comment in her book, but let's see, what did you feel about the modern leader?
This quote is pretty funny. It's true. Like, we do know. And I mean, I'm thinking in a political context, like some of the dinosaurs that are rising to the top, and just like, if we're all talking about modern leadership and a different way, I'm like, really, are we seeing this in action, like as celebrated around? I'm not sure. But I mean, Aranio, you and I in the leadership book that we were working on and writing last year, we really did talk about how leadership is everywhere, and I thought that was a telling component of this book, right? So that we don't, like, leadership doesn't have to have the title and a name. It happens in so many different ways. And so that really stood out as modern leadership to me, like the rethinking who is defined as a leader, how we self-define. And I think that was, for me, what she was really pulling at.
Yeah, I struggled with the modern leadership because my first principal, I think it was, I'd say 17 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, I would call her a modern leader. So it's not just eventuating today. I think there were people who were like that. So, I had that high expectation that every leader I was going to work with had that balance of intrapersonal skills as well as the interpersonal skills and that wanting to build the capacity of others. I think I just assumed that that's what everybody was like, but I learned it wasn't, So I feel that the modern is 15 years ago modern. I struggled with that because I feel like there were elements of that years ago for me, but yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the key differences between the more traditional leadership and modern leadership is basically that it is said, and people try to show that they act in that way, is that modern leaders are more people-oriented, if you like, and there is I think there is a shift from for a more task-oriented towards people-oriented goals and actions, but also what I have seen through my own practice, and also based on what is available in research in various contexts, is that a modern leader is more about creating that space for a higher level of collaboration and developing, stronger, or at least aiming to develop stronger professional networks where people collaborate, learn from each other, and so on and so forth. The last point that I would like to add here is that one of the key differences that I have I have spotted between a more traditional style of leadership versus a modern leadership style is that modern leaders show more empathy, you know, and they're more and more culturally
Personable?
sensitive and sensible, exactly, you know, and culturally sensitive. Well, we might have to be, leaders have to be more culturally sensitive in such a, you know, globalized world where, you know, global citizens travel all over the world and they connect with so many people and so on and so forth. That's all.
For me, I think I agree with what you had referred to, Angie, and all of you. Like when I was reading, I had a long list of leaders that I think they have modern leadership kind of characteristic or definition. However, they're not in the modern time. So for me, it's that as a contemporary aspect, or the way that they will be considered modern in their era, or they will be way beyond or ahead from others what they're thinking, or the usual or expected way of doing things, but they would have this visionary or creative way of doing things, or heads and heart, as she would refer to that. So if anyone is hearing us, we would love to know if how they define modern leader, or if Kristen would also have another definition to clarify who are clearly modern leaders, or for us not to, when we hear it, okay, this is about modernship, no, this is something else we might think about or connect. There was an interesting concept that she referred to.
Reading the room.
I love this part. Yeah, the importance of really understanding the different perspectives and the context. I mean, it really does put leadership into the current moment and the people that you're working with and alongside. So understanding perspectives, thinking, and that's interesting where you think about the head and the heart, how those two pieces are important, because you need, if you can understand, you also need to know how to respond. So reading the room, you can read the room and still continue and not change anything, or, you know, how do you actually respond? And then I'm always surprised when you are in a situation where it's clear that people cannot read the room. And you feel the energy shifting, like going down something wrong here. This is a direction that people are sending messages. So I don't know if it's something to do with energy as well, around how we understand and how well you're connected and understand the people that you are working with. I think that's critical. So I love that section. I'll see if I can pull up a quote that I really like. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think as a facilitator, when I was working with, you know, schools for 2 days, you've really got to hone in on reading the room. You've got to find out what their strengths, what their purpose is for being there, right? So you've really got to spend some time getting to know them. But you also have to, when I say reading the room too, their energy levels go down by the end of the day. So are you accommodating that? Are you pivoting? Are you changing something to give them, and are you agile enough to be able to do that because you're reading the room? And I feel like that comes with being vulnerable, because you have to change things up for them. So it comes down to having those relationships. And I know that one time somebody, there was a staff meeting and somebody said something and everybody reacted. And somebody said, I'm so surprised that they reacted that way. And I thought, really, you know, you can, and that's being aware of others, that's social awareness, right? So you have to be socially aware of other people and not just self-aware. I think that comes into it. What are your thoughts, Rania?
Maria?
Oh, yeah, I agree. And reading the room also, I think, has a dimension of being able to be an active listener, you know, listen to what other people are saying. Sometimes I forget about it. And in the questionnaire, I think I didn't do very well in that question, but I will come back to that. So I think being an active listener is related to being able to read the room, get a sense of what people think about what you're discussing, and also I think it's linked to adaptability as well. Being able to adapt to certain circumstances, and make sure that you're able to develop adaptability. Yeah.
So I think, like reading the room is not only one thing that we do at the beginning of joining a group. There's something continuously we will be reviewing. Like each time we give a training, each time we give a session for our students, each time we have a meeting. So one of the incidents I remember that in one of some of the groups meeting, I noticed that everyone was so offended, and the decisions that we're making, like it was not kind of a wise decisions. So I said, "Oh, guys, stop! We need some chocolates. We need, just to change the discussion or the topic that we're having. Think of something else." We had kind of a 5-minute break, and then we came back, and it was so refreshing for everyone. But they were all surprised, like the way the direction that we were heading. If we continued in the same thing, that would affect all of our performance and all of our decisions. But it just was only to breathe, to rethink, to change something that we're doing. But it was by reading the tone, the way, or the body language, or even the discussions, like this is not a usual way of how the team would be working, or how they would be performing, let's say. So another thing, if we're going back to perspective and perceptions, it's interesting because some people would come and would say this is chaotic, others would say, wow, they are so engaged. And this is always we see, like when we go for observations, or when we go to schools, or talking with school leaders. And I would also add something, like if we're doing this on a continuous basis or regularly, it would become easier for us to notice. And during our PhD sessions, they gave us this video about teaching, and there was school principals with me. At that time, I was working in university settings. So immediately when we saw the video, all the school principals or whoever was working in school setting started to give comments about what's expected from the teacher. But for me, it took me a while to reconnect and to recognize what they were referring to. Not because I didn't work, but like it took me away, like 3-4 years away from teaching or regular classrooms, but because they were within that context, it was easier for them to start commenting and to start reflecting. So sometimes we need to have this kind of fitness, like have this kind of continuous exercise, continuous reflections, continuous engagement, so that we will be able to read the room immediately, even with dealing with different cultures, different contexts, different backgrounds, or even within our team, within ourselves, our own performance. You're nodding your heads, Trinja, as Andrea and Tristan.
I was just going to add that it does ask us whether or not, when we're thinking about working and with future leaders or coaching leaders, the importance of thinking about emotional intelligence, or those qualities that are deemed sort of the soft skills, which we talk about.
I hate that term. I hate that
exactly.
But
and so it's
so
sometimes it's put to the side, right? And if this is really about being able to see how people respond and how the impact, and it's not an easy skill. I think I actually think it's a very complex ability, and like you said, Rania, it takes time to reconnect and think about it, and it takes flexibility to do something about it, or adaptability, as Maria, you were talking about. So it's knowing and then having confidence that you can like turn things around or shift in the moment. So rigid plans, they're just that, they're plans, and then they require people to work with it. So how do we actually build those skills and think about it? Because I think that's where leaders sometimes can get stuck. And so if we're working and coaching others and trying to support leadership in education, for example, that's something that's really important for us. I think we just lost Maria, but she'll be popping back on. I agree with you, Andrea. I hate this term soft skills because it's so diminishing, yeah.
I like the example she gave about chess masters excel at perspective. If you remember this example,
you can refresh my memory.
Yeah, when they were giving masters and chess for master players and early beginners, when they had to order the pieces and put them in a specific order, and then the master players were expecting, but then when they put them randomly, they couldn't guess it out. You remember this, kind of it's 1 or 9, and it was mainly about perspective.
And
Yeah.
strategy, right? Too.
Yep.
It's a lot going on.
Yeah, I think
and-
I've made quite a few little quotes taken out. So did you want to go on into Rania, the next part where
Yeah, just
are we going to
last
share? Yeah.
last thing before, it always when I submit a paper for publication and I write something about perception or perspective, they will continuously return it back and say, could you clarify more? What is are you referring exactly? Is it perspective or is it perception? And I think those kind of things we need to be also aware of. What are we referring and how are we using them within the context? So do you want to talk about the scale, the results, the components?
Yeah, can we just, before, I want to just highlight like one thing I love about Kristen's work is that she builds in those stories. So just talking as well about the chess masters reminded me of how great, and there are some standouts. Like I thought, is it Shelley McManus, the union leader, Australian Teachers Union? Like that was,
and Pip Marlowe was another one I really liked.
yeah,
as well.
and so
yeah,
so just hearing the perspectives, and I think it takes to have the respect to be able, and the confidence in Kirsten, that you can share your story so openly, the successes, but also some of the failures. But I like how she does weave in, and she did that in her last book as well, these real stories and her own. And I think that's powerful contribution to this as well. And just so we can learn with and from others as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So are we, as we're talking about the scale, we might share some other questions while we're reading this book, or we start talking about our quotes and comments. Would like to start.
Can I just ask, with your scale, was anybody surprised by their results?
I was about to ask the same question.
I pulled mine up and I went, oh, that's spot on. And I'm thinking, I've done quite a few of the strengths, the VIAs, and I've done them a few times. I've done other whole lot of, things. And I'm thinking, wow, that nailed me. And I sort of wondered whether it's where I'm at in my life, my career. Would it change in a year's time? Will I feel different in a different context? I always wonder about that. Is it where I am in this space, in this time? Or if I did this same thing in, say, 2 years' time, would anything vary? I'd love to know your thoughts.
Exactly. Well, to be honest, I thought a little bit surprised when I received the results, because it says that I am more inclined to be more of a head-based leader. But I thought that at this stage of my career, and having that particular leadership role, that leadership hat on, I thought that I'm more of a heart-based leader. So I'm not sure whether this is a misconception. Anyway, so I was a little bit surprised. However, on the other hand, I thought that yes and no, because I think that or at least this is the way I see myself, it's more of a balanced head-based and heart-based. Obviously, we develop a leadership style based on our personality. So I think my personality is more of a heart-based, people-oriented, showing that humility and having this self-awareness. But also, leadership style is linked to the business culture, to the organizational culture that we enact our leadership. So yeah, for me it is a yes and no. So I'm still trying to understand where I am positioning myself on that spectrum. But obviously it is related to the culture and at which stage of our life we are, professional life, we are at. So yeah. I wonder, will that change next academic year? Who knows? Anyway, I would love to hear the views from other colleagues.
Rania, you go first.
So let's just introduce this for the audience, just to make it a little bit easier for them. When you're reading the book, as we had mentioned, there are 4 components each in heads and hearts. I'm just trying to have oops. So we have curiosity, that's part of the heads part, wisdom, capability, perspectives. And we have the orange one, which is self-awareness, courage, humility, empathy. This is how the results would be. And then the results would be either your head, heart, or is it kind of a balance? For me, it was also more kind of a head-based, which I agree with. However, it was very similar kind of results. It was not like a huge gap between all of them. And guess which one would be the first thing for me?
Humility.
Humility.
Interesting. So the top one was curiosity.
Okay, well, I'll accept that one. Yep, I see
Yeah.
that.
So curiosity, wisdom were the top 2. Empathy, interestingly, was the kind of last one, which I was a little bit hesitant with. Self-awareness, courage, perspective had kind of similar kind of results in a way or scores. I like the action plan and the things that she suggested, but the humility items within the scale, I had some comments about them. And even the humility section in the whole book, I had some kind, when do we go with humility without humiliating ourselves? So even when she mentioned this kind of concept, go ahead with your results.
So I also landed in the head component. I'm actually a little bit of it's like a heart sandwich. I've got 2 heart of self-awareness and empathy, and then all the head, and then the bottom, it's humility and courage. I actually really struggled with doing this scale, to be honest, because I'm like, how accurate is this? Is this what I think? Is this what I think people think? And just, I really how do I mark myself as am I really, what level? So I don't know. So I was really interested in the scale itself, and would be interested to have people look at it about who I work with, as if they consider me a leader. Because I did struggle with, especially when you're looking at humility, because you're kind of well, I don't want to, is this really where I am? So I'm I don't know if this is an accurate score or these are actually true at this moment in time, how I've been reflecting on leadership in the past year and a half. So who knows, as Maria says, what'll happen as things change. But I struggled with a few of the concepts as well. I'm glad you raised that, Rania, to see if we can dig into a few of them. That would be interesting.
Yep.
What was your top one? Mine was self-awareness, we said, and yours was curiosity, right, Rania?
Yep.
What about you, Maria? Andrea, what were your top?
Mine was humility, was my top.
Wow.
Wow.
And my bottom one was courage, which I
My
can see
bottom
that.
too.
Yeah.
So you're going to say you can
mine
see that?
Sorry?
No,
You said you
mine,
can see that?
I can see that. Yeah. So I got the 3 of the heart: humility, self-awareness, and empathy. And then I've got all the head. And then at the bottom, I've got the courage, the last one of the heart. So I can see that. I know I need to focus more on the headspace personally. But then that's another question I've got, is the difference between management and leadership. Is it a sliding scale of what's needed at the time? And we'll talk about that later, but that's my curious question of that. Yeah, Maria?
yeah, in my case, it was wisdom as the highest one and courage as the lowest one. So I think I need to work on that part for sure, because courage is, compared to all the other ones, is at the very lowest, the lowest end. And that was a surprise for me, to be honest. So yeah, when I read the book, I need to do some work. I think it's a practical tool, so that's the way I will treat it, really. So
when I was reading, Andrea, when I was reading, I thought that you would have humility one of the topics, because this is something you had highlighted within the previous discussions, and you continuously would focus on kind of leadership skills, that this is something a must. For me, it was, as Trista had mentioned, how are we going to define it, and who's going to decide it's, what level of action others are seeing it, because that differs from a culture to another. One of the professors that I met recently, he was telling me, you don't need to be that humble, like we're in the same level, we are learning from each other. I said, but I'm respecting your level of expertise. Does not mean that I'm not courageous enough or I'm not challenging your ideas. It's just a matter of that I'm giving you that space and recognition, like for your age, for your contribution, for many things that you had done in your life, which I'm still learning and trying to do, but does not mean in any way I didn't do that. And when we're talking about courage, that's interesting because it was my fifth score, or my fifth in the list. It's not only about us to be courageous, because I think that we're all as courageous. It's also to help others how to speak up and stand out and to voice, kind of their experiences. So it's interesting how she had listed those items and how she explained them within the sections. But I would add others, not only those. And for wisdom, how she's defining wisdom and how she's helping us also to teach and reflect on being a wise person or sharing wisdom within our networks or colleagues or settings. Any thoughts about the sections before we go to the comments or the?
Well, I think you just raised a really interesting point to consider. So, Kirsten Ferguson is situated in Australia. Has a military background. The leaders that are being interviewed are really do have particular roles in business or, and often in sort of Western contexts. So Rania, I think that's really helpful, very corporate. So I think your point about cultural context is so important. So courage, what are the repercussions too, and standing up, and how when respect comes in. So I'm really thinking about what you've just shared in the sense of, so is this from a Western context? Is this these particular terms? How do we define them? Who's defining them? I think that's
male, female too. Is there a difference between those? Is courage on the bottom for a lot of men? I don't know. Be interesting to know that.
Yep. And I think also discussing, the terms and the way that we're expressing those things within our context. So for someone, it might be so courageous to do this, but others would find it, no, it's not up to the level or they can do more. So it may be because of their families, it may be because of their awareness, it may be because of their standards. You never can judge, and it's not about judging. I think the scale, as Kristen mentioned within our previous discussion with her, it's more about our own self-awareness and rating, not asking others. You remember when I answered some of the questions and said, this is what my children, my husband, and she referred the question back to me and she said, what are you thinking? How would you evaluate those things? And how you will mention that again. But I struggled with the humility section, I would have lots of comments on the side and
can you talk a little bit more about that, Rania? Like in the humility section in particular, what was the tension for you?
So coming from two different, let's say, domains, academia and practitioners, both of them, you have several things. So in our culture, if you start talking about yourself, and I think we discussed this also within some other books, you would say, I'm Dr. Rania Sawalhi, for example. But for me, I would say I'm Rania because this is what I'm used to doing. This is how I would like people to call me. Others would think this is humiliating yourself or not recognizing your degree. Others would think this is humility. And I have many of my colleagues advise me, you're a female, so you need to start with the degree that you gained, which I still can't understand. Degree doesn't define me. It's one of the things that I achieved. I achieved many other things, which I might be considering, why would I wouldn't say I'm a mother, instead of doctor, for example. Many things would come up to my mind and how others would start thinking. While others would say, when you start talking about yourself, I'm Dr. Rania Sawalhi, oh my God, she's her ego, she's seeing herself, she's not, we cannot talk to her, she's a professor, they have this kind of different perspectives or expectations. What did you say, Andrea?
I was going to say their perception of the title. So that's their perception, which that's the thing is there's so many different people and they all bring their own biases to to what they
Yes.
view, right?
So just to conclude, usually I would just say I will start the conversation like Amrani. I wouldn't even mention like some of those kind of titles. And then at a specific stage, they, oh my God, you're a doctor. Sorry, I couldn't see you. Like, why are you apologizing? We were working like normal people. Once they will start knowing about the degree and other achievements, I'm so sorry. Now I can, okay, what's the difference? So why did you change? You know, like what happened? That would stop you from doing specific things after knowing about the degree or knowing about other things that I would. So sometimes I find it kind of interesting of how to introduce ourselves, but the advice I gave, like you're non-Western, so you start with a degree, you start with your achievements, which I'm still trying to balance. While I was reading this section, you know, like which culture, how do we start that, and what exactly would be the best role modeling, as she also mentioned and referred to role modeling. So either we need to stop, you know, like the domino effect. There's some norms that we need to start discussing and referring to. But it's kind of interesting way of discovering things at different teams and different working groups. Did I
I
answer
think
your
I love
question?
Adam Grant's confident humility. So you're confident that you have knowledge to share, and you come with some, you know, some values and information and experiences, but you're humble enough that you can learn from others. So I like that, because I feel like it's confident humility. It's a balance. It's not, do you know what I mean? I feel like that. I like that terminology there.
And that would also, for me, like how curiosity might be in the top, but you are not humble enough. So curiosity and humbleness would be aligned. So that's kind of the scale thing that didn't resonate with me much. Like it didn't make sense of how it works or how it could be developed further, but it's an interesting way of reading it. Trista, Maria?
Yeah. Sorry, let me check. Well, it is about different people's perceptions, and I can see that there is a big difference between how people perceive the title in Eastern versus, you know, the Western part of the world. Again, based on my own experience, there have been some people who have perceived the title of doctor as power, you know, and authority and control. So when I was working in Asia, for example, none of my students were addressing me as Maria, although I was insisting. I was saying, no, it's Maria, you know, yes. You know, I'm an academic and I am a research, even some research assistants who have also had holding this title, you know, they didn't really they didn't feel comfortable to address me as Maria, because again they felt that, you know, I have got more power, more authority, and control as well, because I was leading a program and so on and so forth. So I think it relates to I agree, really, it relates to culture.
Do you think it's
how people perceive
power or respect too? Because I've heard they respect.
Yeah,
that's how I've been always told. In certain countries, they respect a teacher.
Yeah.
And an academic is a teacher of teachers, sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
So that will go back to reading the room, you know, like, is it matter of power or is it matter of respect, and how we're going through that? Yeah.
It's interesting that a little title can be quite challenging.
Yeah.
You know, you know, putting it, I even think about it like, am I going to use this title in a presentation? Do I put it as doctor? Do I put it as PhD? Do I even address it? Do I name myself? You know, I wrestle with the idea of each, and because it's about, I think it's you know, from the book, something that really stood out was this being the smartest person in the room section. And, you know, like you have this idea of word to wisdom ratio that she talks about. So like, who takes the most air up, whose ideas, you know, do you actually listen to other people's ideas? Is there do you seek out different perspectives, or is it really about delivering your own is it like you tend to talk more than you listen? you share opinions on topic, even if it's not your area of expertise. You have a need to be right and see discussions as a chance to win. You listen to other points of view only to find flaws or holes in this information. And then you share opinions even when they're not sought, and you're uninterested in diverse points of view because you already have the answer. So that's an interesting, if we think about also perspectives and this idea of humility, it's a bit of a dance, and also being courageous, like when you do need to stand up time. So all of these things are coming together and making me think about how they impact based on context and where you are and who you're with, and how the impact and what your aim is really.
And
I
the
think power
example
does
that
play a role.
you mentioned regarding leading or digital kind of leadership, when she mentioned that sometimes they would all go online and one person is online. So I was thinking, like, is it really needed to do this? You remember that the example she mentioned, if one of the team members cannot join in person, they will
Yes.
all join online. Sometimes we forget this, or we would just think like, so that they do not feel like they're excluded. So are we going to enable such kind of practices, or we'll just go with the easier, or we think that it's fine? You're like, there are many factors might be affecting, not only, this decision, and being fair and unfair when we know, like, we empathize people. Others would feel like the decision was unfair for others, but we think according to the information that we gained or we used, that this is a fair decision based on the case or based on the context. What do you think about that?
You're talking about the remote, when she looks at the section about remote work, right? That it doesn't always have to be in person.
Yep.
And that there's a big move to in person, but the remote work, and that the suggestion is that if you are working with a group and one person can't join. Yeah, I struggled with that because wait, you mean if everybody's together, we all go online, even though we're sitting together, which seems a bit, I don't know, maybe we learn how to do hybrid a lot better, or find ways to do something that incorporates in how we think about the leadership. But I don't know. Yeah, I wasn't fully convinced on that one. I'm also not fully convinced that remote is the
way to
the only. Yeah, I think there's a lot of power in reading the room when you read the room because of the people you're with.
Yeah.
I have a much harder time online to get a sense of like, how is this landing, or like, what are people really thinking? Yeah.
I think that we can achieve what she's referring to by either opening the camera, that this person would see all whoever is in the room, so we don't have kind of side talking or different ways of taking decisions. I think there are other factors or other consequences for that, but how we can do it smartly according to our context and according to our needs, like in a way.
Yeah, I know when I was facilitating, 6 hours a day, a couple of days a week, having 24 people on a screen and looking at them, you can't pick up all the body language. They can't even all be on the screen to see them. And it's really hard to say, are you happy? Use your emotive, your reactions. To me, it sort of seems very, click of the button and if they're happy or whatever. I feel like, and I've always said this, I think the first day, even when you're going to university, we had the first 2 years where our cohort met on the weekends or whatever. We built that relationship. For the people who came through COVID, they didn't have I don't feel they had as strong a bond as we did, because we had those face-to-face connections, having lunch together, having conversations beyond the doctorate. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like I said to my daughter who is going to university this year, go to campus as much as you can to build the relationships. And it's the informal relationships just as much as the formal ones that you can, that's my view there.
Do you want to share quotes from the book, or what resonated with you, or?
With me? Yeah. I liked the waiting too long to support the aspiring leaders. I feel like that's something that in education, I feel like we need to do that. That's been a passion of mine for quite a long time. I enjoyed the book, but nothing really challenged me. Like nothing, I feel like push me out of my comfort zone, put it that way. if anything, it confirmed some of my views and experiences. But I think the management leadership part, to me, I've always struggled with, because sometimes I've been told, well, you need to manage the people. And I'm thinking, how do you manage people without your relationship? And I don't know, to me, it feels like a sliding scale. You have to manage sometimes when it's needed, but you're building the relationship and building their capacity through leadership. I'm still struggling with that. Love to hear your thoughts on that one. Krista, you're giggling, so you're first.
My God, isn't that our full PhDs being done around management and leadership? I'm like, let's just solve it right here. Sorry, Andrea. Maybe someone else has something to comment on the management leadership. Otherwise, I will share some of my thoughts on. No.
We still have this kind of long debate and conversation related to what's the difference, and we can add to the top of that the administration level and like management. So we're not going to go deep with that. But if she's talking about leadership and engaging, and she started at the beginning of the book when she highlighted that everyone is a leader and they're leading from where they stand. So I think that will set the tone for what she's referring to between management and leadership in a way. But that's a long debate. That's a long discussion. I like
for another time.
There is still a debate.
Anyway. I like the self-awareness when she mentioned about the Arab Spring examples. I think that's kind of a timely needed, and those kind of examples shed the light on how we really need to reflect and to understand those different elements and the stories that we're connecting and how we're sharing them. I think also within the sections that she had been highlighting related to the 4 L's and those kind of takeaways and volunteering to help or to know more about the context of the people around us. So there are lots kind of items or main points that need to be revisited to be discussed. Trista?
I have the 4 L's right here. That was something that really stood out to me, that reflection backwards. So Maria, you'll see it. It's a little later in the book around self-awareness, but it's been divided into these quarterly self-assessment that for leaders to take a look at. So it's around love. What do I do? What did I do in the last quarter that I loved? What do I long for? So what do I wish I had done? Loathe, what didn't I like doing? And learn, what did I learn and experiment with that I can take with me into the next quarter? And I think that was just like super helpful. It's also great check-ins. It's kind of like, the what went wells or even better ifs, but just making sure they have time for that as a leader. I wanted to highlight some of like a little bit of a tension around, are we talking about leadership? Like the way of being, or are we talking about leaders as individuals? And like sometimes like that, the culture of the place as well matters to how leaders and leadership is enacted. So that's another piece that I'm thinking about. And then the last comment I wanted to make is, as I was looking at this and thinking about the scale and thinking about my own answers to them and thinking about, like how I would like to be seen as a leader versus how maybe, the real deal is, I'm reminded of my youngest daughter. She's 10, turning 11 next week. And as she was heading off to camp this week, she's going for 3 weeks. And we were talking about, I really hope that I get along with everybody and there's not somebody that's super annoying in my cabin because they're there for 3 weeks. She goes, although I could be the person that's super annoying in my cabin. And I thought that was a really interesting perspective because I'm looking at this as leader and leadership. And I'm like, I'm like thinking about all these other people as I was reading this. I'm like, maybe I should be also thinking about who I am as a leader. So thanks to Kala for the good mind. Maybe it's not as it all seems. Maria.
Yeah, I think coming back to the point about the differences between management and leadership, as Rania said, it is still there is a long debate about it, but the relationship between management, these concepts really, has been a subject of continuing discussion in academia, among professionals, and so on and so forth. In my view, there is a distinction, and but obviously there might be some other colleagues and practitioners who might disagree. Anyway, I'm not going to go into that any deeper, any further. As I said, I haven't read the book because it's not available here at the moment. But what made me start thinking is whether the term modern leader, does it mean that we're talking about a leader in modern times, or the whole perception and the actions and the behavior of a leader has changed because of the circumstances? You know, we live in turbulent times, and so on and so forth. So it's not clear to me what, because I haven't read the book, what is the author's perception and what's the narrative about that modern leadership, you know, the characteristics, the skills, and so on. I can understand that there are some qualities that she's mentioning which are more, you know, affectionate qualities, really, which are associated to the heart part, and some others which are more to the head-based qualities. But still, I'm not clear whether the narrative should be about whether we should talk about a leader in modern times or a modern leader who has got characteristics that leaders didn't used to have in the past.
Or modern leadership.
Or leadership, yes. But this is another big topic, a huge topic, Trista. Anyway, I think overall, I would say that we need all of them, and we pick up the appropriate, you know, characteristics, skills, actions in different circumstances in order to be able to do well what we're doing. Yeah.
So I think, as we had just mentioned at the beginning, when we try to define what does she mean by modern leadership, while reading the book, we will have many examples about previous leaders in different, maybe in different historical kind of times, which we would recognize that they had been practicing modern leadership in a way. They wouldn't have the digital leadership for sure component, but they would have different kind of wisdom, humility, empathy, curiosity, like the characteristic or the set of components that she had mentioned. And with the questions that we have on the slide, I think this is something that might help us in identifying and thinking, what does modern leadership? Because she just started the discussion or the conversation by highlighting that this is something needed. Either we have a different term, or we might find it either a different kind of leadership style, because each month, each day, we have a different adjective had been added, or a different noun that had been describing what do we mean by leadership, and how leaders are going to have their action plan. Are they going to focus on? But with the examples that she was referring, it's not as she started the book with the story, and she's amazing with selecting the stories and going, you know, like through them. It's just we don't need to neglect and only focus on evidence-based kind of decisions and learning moments, as much as we also need to understand the culture, the context, empathizing perspectives, to take that all into consideration while we're moving forward. Trista, Andrea, as we're concluding, going through.
I think those are great questions that she poses, and they come in the heart and scale, right? Just to get you thinking. I think one of the areas that is worth building in all cultures is feedback. So she talks about feedback in here, but I mean, honestly, and one of the researches that we just did recently, and I was sharing it yesterday in a session I was doing for some of my colleagues, previous colleagues at the Western Quebec School Board. They're all administrators, system and school leaders. But what the research we gathered across the province, people get no feedback, none in a typical year from like actually structured feedback. You get feedback, like angry emails, maybe from a parent, for example, like that gives you feedback, but real feedback on your profession and your how things are going based on your own goals, and also from a caring perspective and potentially non-evaluative, it's really lacking in education for teachers and leaders. And so how do we set up opportunities for feedback? And like I really like that section when she talks about how to give feedback and strategies and the mapping it out, because it's a really hard thing to do well, especially if it's difficult feedback. It's never easy, so we avoid it, but we also don't receive it, and there's no structures, it seems, for people to do it. So how do you know that you're doing things?
Yeah, but that's the thing, Trista. Is it because there are no structures and system to get feedback in our, in the education settings that we work at, or is it because people do not welcome feedback? Because some people welcome,
Yeah.
I think
know
both.
Ellie Drago Severson's got a wonderful book on feedback, because we usually give feedback the way we've received feedback, and not everybody's the same. And there's nothing worse than me being asked, can I give you some feedback? And they don't even give you time to say, no, this is not really the right day because I've had a really bad morning. They just give it to you. And I think I've written down, feedback is not easy. I ask for feedback when I go for job interviews and application processes, and they go, you're the only person who's actually asked for that. And like, I've got nothing to lose, right? I only want to get better at my application process. But I think you have to have the relationships, or you have to know what structure is there to have those conversations and the feedback. And not all feedback is positive. I question the positive feedback according to whom? I get critical feedback, and it is positive for me because I trust and respect the person. But you can sometimes get that feedback and they're just telling you what they think you want to hear. So that's not positive feedback to me, because it's not genuine. So, but I feel like relationships need to be in place, or a really good structure.
And there is a dichotomy as well. It's feedback for developmental purposes, as well as feedback for it has got a judgmental orientation, if you like. I'm so sorry, I need to go to another meeting.
That's fine. We're over time anyway.
Yeah. But going back just quickly about the structure and the feedback by Maria. So thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Maria.
As
Thank you.
we need also to help others to give us feedback. We might set up our own structure of welcoming and expecting, and what kind of things that we're sharing.
But then you're putting the onus on the person to set that up. I mean, I would like to see both of those things. I'd like to see it as part of the culture, and so that's not on you, that it's to ask. And anyway, go ahead. Sorry, Rania, I interrupted you.
No, it's the same, because even when we start, like sometimes people would be sensitive for any type of feedback, regardless if it's kind of positive, or they might say it negative at a specific stage of the team dynamic or team building. But when you continuously be a role model and to reinforce those kind of practices, they would reach to a point that they will be seeking, and they will start having those kind of questions just to help them to improve and to reflect and to be ready for specific feedback. Instead of only sitting and saying, okay, you were super, or everything went well. That's not going to help anyone. But if I will come and say, okay, what did I do well this time? Or last time we have discussed this, did I achieve it? Or did I get near, like their mind will start moving towards this kind of conversations, instead of being so sensitive. No, she's criticizing, or they're criticizing me, or they're having this, like attacking me or personalizing the conversation, instead of focusing really, this is kind of something I might be interested. I know that's a very interesting book. You want to mention it's Womankind or Head and Heart, or we cannot?
My favorite? I love Womankind. This one, but I mean, this was great conversation. Great to chat.
Yeah, and the skills is kind of a different one. Many things had been revisited in a way, but both of them have been addressing. Trista, sorry, Andrea.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed, as I said, I read it quite a few months ago, but I like the way she writes. I think anyone can sort of pick it up, and it's an easy read, as in Andy Hargraves always says, if you can get your point across well. I think she did that, especially with her stories as well.
Yeah, and Slow Professor.
Yep, our next book will be on 3rd of November. The Slow professor. We're excited to be discussing the challenging of culture of speed in the academy section.
Amazing. I look forward to
forward to
seeing you
it.
all.
Thank you all.
Happy
ladies,
reading.
Thank you.
and happy watching. Thank you.